We spoke to them and nothing happened. Then we came back to the deputy minister, who didn't do anything, and she has denied our request for meetings. Basically, nothing has happened. We got the runaround.
Okay. Who did she tell you guys to talk to first?
She told us to contact our executive director.
Okay. So if you get it, we're going to get that meeting with Manson Smith. What exactly was the plan to ask her for? Did you have a proposal ready? Like, what were the specific asks that you see are needed?
We want to share our issues that we've had ongoing for years and try and resolve them. They've just been lingering for too long, and it seems the deputy minister is not willing to have that sit down with us.
Can you be a bit more specific about what sort of things the government should be doing in this case? Did you have a list of things you wanted from her?
Our first issue is our lack of staff. We're required to have additional qualifications and additional degrees to teach at provincial schools. And so you need to have those qualifications to teach deaf and hard of hearing students or deaf-blind students. And unfortunately, those programs are not turning out a lot of graduates, including from the deaf-blind qualifications program, which leads to a lack of teachers and for succession. Other supply teachers are unionized, while our provincial school supply teachers are not. Also, they're the lowest paid, which makes it very difficult to have a complement of supply teachers. If a teacher is not at school, then we're not able to replace them with supply teachers. For even those teachers who do retire from the provincial schools, they are not willing to come back and work as supply teachers. We need the investment in our school. We need the resources to be provided and maintenance for our buildings, as you can see from some of these pictures. And for those who work in the front offices, they're sitting very pretty in their nice offices while we are suffering in the schools. Now, I just wanted to add one thing, if you don't mind.
Don't go for it.
Our students are vulnerable. They're deaf, blind, or deaf-blind. They require additional supports and resources to help them become successful in their future. So that's why I say we need to have that investment in the schools. If I wasn't provided that when I was coming up in the provincial schools, I wouldn't be the success that I am today. As well, to add another example of providing respect and dignity to our students, there are students who are commuting long distances, up to 70 kilometers, to come to our schools. So our school, for one, is in Milton, coming from Scarborough in the morning. When they get to school, they're required to stand outside in the cold, snow, or rain for quite a while before they can come into the schools. They're not allowed in until 8:30. Some of them arrive at 8 o'clock in the morning and have to go to the washroom after that long commute. So they'll urinate outside in front of the school building because they can't wait any longer and they're not allowed in the schools. As a mom, I have 3 children myself, and I would be quite angry if my child had to urinate outside because they're not allowed in the school. What are we doing for our students?
I'm also curious about the cowbell anecdote. What specific school did this take place in? And is there more to that story about why they would choose the cowbell in a school for the deaf?
I would love to know why they chose a cowbell at a school for the deaf, but this was implemented only last year. And the administration and managers decided that that was going to be the ideal solution when there was an issue in a classroom to call for help. When we advised them and reminded them that half of our students and our staff are deaf, that using a cowbell is considered autism, they denied that. They said, oh, the cowbell is for us, it's not for you, so it's not autism. But we wanted to sit down with them to provide the best feedback. They weren't interested. And the deputy minister is very well aware of this, and the cowbell is still being used today. It's still, 1 year later, still there. And that's just one example of discrimination and just the non-dignity that they provide to us.
Can you specify what school this is in?
It's at Ernest C. Drury Elementary School in Milton.
Okay, thank you. If you don't hear back from Lecce or his deputy minister after this, what do you think that says?
I think it says that we're not important. We're substandard, second-class citizens to them, and the continued neglect will just continue. We're used to the neglect, but we feel like we have to call attention to this, to the public. They need to know what's happening in our schools. And we're going to continue to raise awareness until a solution is put in place. And any solutions have to be decided upon with feedback from the deaf, blind, and deafblind staff. Policies, education, anything that's being implemented should be in consideration with feedback from the staff as well.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Next question on the line from Snay Dougal at the Trillium. Please go ahead.
Hi, good morning. My first question was just regarding the call for an Auditor General, for the Auditor General to do an investigation. I'm wondering if you can speak a bit more about what you're hoping to have come out of that. It seems like this has been something, staff have been talking about, you've been raising or trying to raise with the government. What are you hoping would come out of such an investigation?
Thanks, Snay. Maybe
what would?
Maybe I'll start and then turn it over to Tamara if she wants to add anything. Parents, staff, teachers, alumni have been raising concerns about these provincial schools for years. There have been multiple lawsuits against the government for abuse and discrimination at these schools. And Minister Lecce and Premier Ford have not listened. They have not listened to the parents, they have not listened to the staff, they have not listened to the students and alumni. The Auditor General is in a unique position within our system in that they are in many ways the ultimate buck stop for accountability and transparency within the province. An Auditor General audit of these schools will naturally attract public attention. The Auditor General can also put forward recommendations about what needs to be done to fix the situation, to make sure that every child is getting the education that they deserve, the education that the Education Act in Ontario says that they should be getting, that their rights around accessibility are being respected under the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. And those recommendations can become a roadmap for a government that has clearly not been interested in supporting children with disabilities in the province to receive the education that they deserve. Tamara, did you want to add anything?
I would like to add, yes. Unfortunately, our school system is not working the way it is right now. There is no board of trustees. And I believe some kind of governance and accountability needs to be put in place because currently no one is taking that responsibility. There needs to be further education for people to become teachers of the deaf or teachers of the deafblind. Investment needs to be made into our schools. The Education Act apparently says that supply teachers are not allowed to be unionized. That needs to be amended. You have to provide students with what they need: textbooks, extracurricular equipment. They're vulnerable students. They need to be given what they need so that they can finish school and move on to post-secondary education and become successful citizens, as opposed to becoming dependent on social assistance. If I want to know that when I become older and I need to be cared for by the province, someone's going to be able to communicate with me. And if we have our students grow up to be successes, that will happen. So we depend on investments into our education, publicly funded education, to ensure the correct resources are given to our students.
Okay, thank you. And I'm wondering if you can give us a sense of how many students are we talking about at these schools? And I think you had mentioned a wait list of 160 babies. Is there more to that, or is there also a wait list for older children to join these schools? Can you just give us a sense of the numbers?
Yes, please let me clarify. There are 4 provincial schools in Ontario. One of them is a school for blind and deafblind. Our waiting list is for infants till school-aged children. When they're identified as infants, they have to receive the preschool supports, resources, the beginnings of communication to be taught with them, so that once they reach school age, they're able to continue on with their education. And that is what we have currently, a waiting list of 160 families to get that basic beginning information. Unfortunately, we have students coming into school with no language, and that impacts them for life because they haven't had the opportunity to be where their peers are when going into school. Children who are deaf or blind or deafblind need to bond with their families, have communication, and be ready to learn once they enter the education system. I believe there are 170 students who are low vision or blind throughout the province, approximately. And within the deaf schools, the provincial schools, there are about 150 to 200 students who are deaf. And a lot of those students are also in the school boards and the regular schools, but denied entrance into our schools. So when they're there, quite often they're very isolated as the only deaf, blind, or deafblind student in that school, without friends, without supports or access to their education, because they don't have any specialized teachers to educate them.
Okay, and I think my last question for Julian, thanks for sharing your story. I was just wondering if you could speak a bit more to specifically for your child, like what else do you think could help, and what are your concerns long term for your child not getting the support that you feel they need and should be getting currently?
Well, just to add to what Tamara was just saying, the problem for my son is that he had very little access to language before he started going to these schools. We did have the home visiting program, which helped, but there are things that hearing parents like me can't take on for our kids because we just don't have the language to teach them. So we rely 100% on support and the province to help us kind of fill in that gap. So then after that, it's really hard to pinpoint something because everything is connected. It is systemic. When you look in one direction and you think, okay, we're going to deal with this issue, for example, the assessments, then it gets compounded with the fact that, okay, if my son does get an assessment, then what? The teachers are not even in the classroom to deal with the recommendations that the assessments put forth. So there needs to be a kind of top-down approach and deal with everything because there's so many of these things that are just not in place right now. And there's no options for us. That's also very important to understand. I can't work extra hard and put my kid in a good private school. It does not exist. So if these schools are failing our kids, my only option is to watch my son being failed. There's nothing I can do myself, and it's a position that I wish on no parents, is to be completely incapable of doing anything. I completely rely on this system, and it's been failing us. I don't know what else to tell you, really.
Thank you. That's all for me.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much.